You know, when you hear the name King Solomon, what comes to mind? For most of us, it's this legendary golden age, an era of incredible wisdom, wealth beyond imagination, and just total peace. It's the story of a kingdom at its absolute pinnacle.
I mean, the classic image, right? Every person sitting under their own vine and fig tree, a powerful symbol of complete safety and prosperity. No wars, a blessed nation, and a king whose wisdom was famous all over the world. It sounds, well, perfect.
But what if that's not the whole story? What if that shimmering, golden image has a few cracks in it? What if just beneath the surface of this supposedly perfect kingdom, there were some really deep, fundamental flaws?
Okay, so let's dig in. The first signs of trouble, funnily enough, don't show up in the palace or with his wealth. They show up in the land itself, specifically in how Solomon started treating the very territory that was meant to be a divine gift.
So check this out. Right off the bat, we have a major issue. To settle a debt with King Hiram of Tyre, Solomon just hands over 20 cities. And these aren't just any cities, they're inside the borders of the Promised Land. He's literally using a piece of Israel as collateral on a loan.
And here's why that was such a huge deal. According to the Sinai Covenant, the land wasn't just real estate. It wasn't Solomon's to sell or trade. Ultimately, it belonged to God. For the king, the covenant king, to just give it away to a foreign ruler, that was a serious, serious problem.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because it wasn't just about giving away land, it was also about how he received it. You've got two sides of the same coin here, a flaw and a problem, and both of them show that the foundation of the kingdom was starting to crack.
Let's talk about that city he received, Gezer. It was a wedding gift from the Pharaoh of Egypt. Sounds great, right? But here's the thing. Gezer was this pocket of Canaanite influence that Israel was supposed to have dealt with generations ago, but they never did. The fact that a foreign king had to come in and conquer it for Solomon just highlighted this long-standing failure. It showed Israel hadn't really secured its own land from dangerous pagan influences.
So we're already seeing some shaky ground when it comes to the land, but the problems didn't stop there. Oh no, they went right into Solomon's palace and into his personal conduct as king. See, there were very specific rules for Israelite kings, and, well, Solomon seemed to treat them more like suggestions.
Way back in the book of Deuteronomy, God laid out the law for any future king. It was pretty simple, really. A short list of don'ts designed to keep the king humble, dependent on God, and different from all the other kings. Don't go crazy collecting horses, don't take a bunch of wives, and don't hoard massive amounts of silver and gold.
It's a fair question, isn't it? I mean, we all know the stories about his hundreds of foreign wives and his booming trade in horses and chariots, but what about that third rule, the one about stockpiling a ton of silver and gold?
And the Bible gives us this wild, super specific number. It says Solomon's annual income was 666 talents of gold. Now, when an ancient writer gives you a number that precise, they want you to sit up and pay attention. This isn't just a number, it's a statement.
And just to give you a sense of what we're talking about, 666 talents is about 25 tons of gold every single year. And that's not even counting all the other money flowing in from trade and taxes. It's just a staggering, astronomical amount of wealth.
He was so incredibly rich, it literally warped the economy. Silver, which was a precious metal everywhere else, was basically worthless in Jerusalem. This goes way beyond just being prosperous. This is extreme, over-the-top accumulation flying right in the face of the law.
So what do you do with all that wealth and power? You build something to show it off. And for Solomon, that ultimate expression was his throne. And believe me, this was no ordinary chair.
This quote from the text really says it all, doesn't it? The whole point of the throne was to be one of a kind. It was a physical declaration that Solomon's kingdom was better, grander, and more powerful than any other kingdom on earth. A total monument to worldly success and national pride.
And this is the real kicker. The design of the throne itself was a direct shot at the law. It was set up on these 6 massive steps, physically lifting Solomon way up high above everyone else. But the law for the king specifically said he should not consider himself better than his brothers. His own throne was a symbol of him breaking that very command.
Okay, so what are we supposed to take away from all this? This picture of a kingdom that's both glorious and deeply, deeply flawed. This isn't just some dusty old story.
It actually has a lot to say about how we deal with the imperfect institutions in our own lives, whether it's our government, our communities, or even the church.
It seems like we have to navigate between two big traps. First, there's the idealist trap. You expect everything to be perfect, and when it's not, you're just crushed and disillusioned. Then there's the cynic trap. You expect nothing good, so you just accept how bad things are because, hey, nothing's ever perfect. The real path is somewhere in the middle, a balanced hope. You work for change, you call out problems, but you also know that ultimate perfection isn't something we can build on our own. And if you want to boil Solomon's core failure down to one word, it's this: syncretism. It's basically trying to mix oil and water. He wanted to worship the God of Israel, but he also wanted the power, the wealth, and eventually the gods of the pagan nations around him. He tried to have it both ways, and that just doesn't work.
And that's the bottom line here. Even Solomon, the wisest, richest king Israel ever had, couldn't be the perfect covenant king. His incredible reign actually ended up being the ultimate showcase for the limits of human leadership, even the very best leadership.
Which leaves us with this massive question, right? If Solomon, with all his glory, wasn't the real deal, then what was his kingdom pointing to? His imperfect, cracked golden age sets the stage. It creates this deep hunger for a different kind of king and a different kind of kingdom, one that could finally get it right.